This is Laserlight Presents All About the Gig. All right, we're back. Today we're going to talk about the secrets of success. How to gig, how to make ends meet, how to make this a lifestyle and not just a pastime. Today we have again back in the house. We've got Dave Sorelli and Devin Kruger. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Pretty good, man. How you doing?
All right. Really good, really good. So we couldn't have two better examples of how to in the house today, right? Let's start with discussing where to begin. So you're a young musician, you're studying, you're studied, you've been pursuing the dream, and it's time now to decide, do I make this a full-time effort? How do I make this a full-time effort? And what type of models can I adapt to and apply to my process to see this through, with as much longevity as it will offer me, right?
Yeah.
Dave, maybe let's start with you and talk a little bit about that moment when you decided, this is it for me. This is how I'm going to go forward. Where were you in life when you were at that crossroad of what to do now?
Yeah, man. So the narrative is actually pretty similar, no matter what geographic location or what city you're in. So for me personally, I always wanted to do something musical. I had been taking lessons since I was 5 years old, always loved it, played in bands in middle school, high school, whole nine yards.
Wow.
And then I hit the kind of crossroads when I entered college, and I tried to dual major in both music and engineering, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
As is a common narrative with a lot of my peers, and I ended up dropping the engineering thing to pursue music full time because I've always had this thought in the back of my head that this has to work. I won't let it not work.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the idea of making music my career, making it my passion. And I learned pretty early on through a lot of my mentors and, the networking of college that one of the keys to this is diversity, being able to play in any situation, any different genre, and also being a really good educator as well as a great performer.
Interesting. Hope everybody heard that loud and clear. Versatility.
Yes,
Absolutely. That's what makes you shoppable, right?
Yes, that is key. And, it's very important to have your passion projects. It's very important to, write music, enjoy music for yourself. But it's also equally important to be a very able sideman on other people's projects. So, if somebody has an album that they're trying to record and they need, a ringer to come in, record it in 3 hours and, not mess up the takes, be very comfortable in those situations. It's equally important to be studied up to the point that you can be called for any situation across any musical genre.
Yeah, very cool. And also to be an accompaniment on a gig.
Absolutely.
Like you said.
Mm-hmm,
so not just in a creative work session, but to also be adaptable to play out, to be a live player.
Very much so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Devin, what was that crossroad timeline for you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to sound like a little bit of deja vu, but I was also a dual major in engineering. And I was coming to this realization that I'd also been taking lessons since first grade. I played in bands in junior and high school. I'd actually started making some money playing in bands in high school, and I was just going through the process of trying to balance these degrees, realizing that, if I try and do this engineering thing, I'm going to get out of work every day and do nothing but want to play guitar. I'm going to be such a mediocre engineer because I'm going to want to spend every waking moment I have not doing that career, doing this instead. And when I was realizing just like how pulled my interests were, I realized that I just have to go with plan A and there is no plan B. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to dive straight into this.
Yeah, paying attention to the fact that it is true. You can do what you love,
mm-hmm.
And it's not unrealistic to think that, that couldn't happen where I'm at in this time and place in my life, or, where I live, because the circle will always continue to expand as long as you're widening your own personal circle. your capabilities, your compatibilities, your interests, and those are the things to pay attention to, especially at a certain time in your life when you're looking at, well, this is what society wants me to do. This is what, my inner circle, my family wants me to do. But this over here is what I want to do, and it's important to follow that. It's so cliche to hear, but you can follow your dreams, and especially in music, I think.
That's exactly what happened to me too. I was, always pretty quick with school stuff. That had me in the advanced maths and sciences and stuff throughout middle school and high school. And, everybody from my parents to my high school counselor and, everybody was saying, hey, STEM degree, that's your route. Go that way. Engineering's booming right now. Make something happen there. You're going to make a lot of money and live comfortably. And, I had all these people telling me that I should pursue this one avenue. And at the end of the conversation, I'd always say, well, what about music? And they'd be like, no, that's not a real thing. Don't try that. That's, the chances of making it in that are 1 in a million. Yeah. And, despite all these naysayers, I just didn't want to let that go. And, I quickly realized that, if you work at it, if you truly devote yourself to it, it's very attainable. And that means, being receptive to all types of music. I remember it was like this shell shock moment the first time that I had to sit down and like learn a Katy Perry tune, right? And for all of our listeners out there that might be chuckling or shaking their head, I want to say, can you verbatim play Dark Horse by Katy Perry? And I'm not saying approximating, but if you were hired to play it verbatim, meaning the exact line, the exact tone, the exact everything, could you do it? And, it was like this weird culture shock of being like, no, there's actually a ton of work that goes into this. And people just think that, you can take take the high road or take the low road and, just approximate. But no, it's actually a very, very demanding thing to be able to do.
And not only that, but, the first time that you might get that gig that really gets you in the window for something, that it's not only learn that song verbatim, but here's 19 other songs and we'll see you in 2 days.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And it's like, and that's going to be your window into like maybe this gigging life or this band or all kinds of myriad things.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And I think circling back to what you led with, Dave, is, understanding when people say things like, well, that's a 1 in a million, thing. Well, yeah, it's probably 1 in a million that you're going to get into the Hall of Fame, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But it's not 1 in a million that you're going to be able to be a self-supporting musician.
No, that just doesn't make sense. There aren't even 1 million people in Toledo, and I know more than one person who's doing it. Yeah. So therefore, the statistic is void.
Back to the engineering math. It's like, I'll call you out, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Stats are on our side here.
It's important to understand that you can make a living, and you can see it through. And if it's your passion, you must not ever quit.
Yeah.
You must not ever quit on it.
And I think what a lot of people mistake sheer luck for in the music industry is when this becomes your career, you don't have a 9 to 5. You don't go to an office and clock in and work for 8 hours and leave. You set your own schedule. You are in charge of your gig schedule. You are in charge of booking, managing, practicing, and everything else. And that requires incredible work ethic. A lot of people that want to pursue music full time, they're like, oh, cool. I'm just going to play guitar all day. No, not exactly. That is part of the day. But if you're playing to a vacuum and you're practicing the same 5 songs over and over again, nothing's going to come of that. You need to be able to market yourself, expand your tune list, and be able to actually book out into all these different venues that are looking for live entertainment.
Sure.
And that's where a lot of people kind of fall off the wagon is they don't know how to brand themselves. They don't know how to market themselves. And quite frankly, a lot of people maybe just have never learned that kind of work ethic to be able to make it through the hurdles of the everyday musician life.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially with what I like to call the busy work. Like I spend more of my day not practicing often, but instead doing light video editing, answering emails, answering texts, doing small Photoshop work, so that way I can make a poster or just a post about where I'm playing next. There's all these little tasks that I have to do daily before I'm even really able to think about, let's just practice. I don't even have songs to learn this week. I just need to actually practice, because that's another one of those tasks that if I skip it for a day, if I think about my life and all the things I want to accomplish, one day of skipping practice doesn't mean a lot, but it means a lot for me mentally, because I need to keep these streaks going, so that way every 6 months I'm 10% better than I was. And I'm constantly striving to get better, because I don't want to plateau in my 20s.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
properly
Yeah.
manage the void. Don't create too many gaps in your regime, your regimen, right? Not regime.
Yeah.
But don't create too many gaps in your regimen, because it then becomes not a regimen.
Exactly. And that's one of those things, like, a lot of people have asked me throughout the years, is there actually any benefit to going to music school? We've probably both heard that, right, Devin?
Oh, yeah.
And my answer every single time is, it's worth it, because if nothing else, they teach you how to properly practice. And, I would be remiss if I didn't, any prospective high schoolers that are thinking like, well, I know how to play. Do I really need to go to music school? If you're on the fence about it, the things that you're going to learn there, if technical ability aside and theory and all the other stuff that you learn in school, you honestly learn how to actually successfully practice. Just the same way that somebody goes to the gym, if you've never been to the gym and you don't understand what that is, you see all these different machines, you kind of understand what they do, but you don't know how you should float from one to the other. You don't know how to regiment certain muscle groups into certain days until a personal trainer teaches you how to do that. Same thing with music school. That's really where you learn how to practice. And on top of that, the amount of connections you make, even just through the first 2 years of being there, you meet all these other musicians that are like-minded and all these professors that can guide you to the right paths. It really opens up some avenues to get your foot in the door in your city.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's layers to the onion, right? And an important piece to being successful, that sustained success factor, is definitely understanding that you do have to create a routine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is an effective routine? And to your point, a weightlifter who wants to achieve weight gain or toning, there are models for how to do so. And, and what is school? One of the layers to that onion. School is learning how to become self-managed, problem solving, and to also develop a consistent approach towards moving forward. How to maintain momentum. When you go out into the real world, and if it doesn't happen to be music, but it happens to be something else, you're going to still need some sort of model that keeps you in the plus category. How am I advancing? How am I sustaining?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And I was just going to say to kind of add to that, not only does school serve that function, but once again, like Dave said, it's a networking function. Like there's a bunch of people that I still get gigs from who I might not have talked to for years, but remember me well enough from school. Maybe they follow me on social media and they can tell that I have grown even since then and I'm doing this full time. And then they're willing to sit there and throw, a gig at me and say, hey, you want to sub in for this? And I'm automatically on their call list, even if we've never played together. And that has paid off for me more times than I can tell. And on top of that, school is often kind of the first 4 years of someone's 10-year stint to break into a scene, which is a bit of an unspoken rule. And, you can play with the numbers a little bit, but roughly if you talk about someone who is not a beginner, but is starting to enter that pro stage, that there's maybe a 10-year cycle where it's you might need day jobs. You might need things to, keep the income going, but you should spend the next 10 years transitioning into doing this full time,
ramping up towards something.
And you should know that right now you should be spending every minute you can playing with as many people as meeting as many people as you can, showing up to as many jams as you can. Basically, if you're not gigging that night, go find music and go be a part of it.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of players, they enter school at year 1 of that 10-year stint. So it's really important for them to hit that as hard as they can, so that way, hopefully there is only another 5 to 6 years once they get out before they feel like they're firmly in a scene.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, which is why you tend to see a lot of like kind of young players sometimes, is there's a handful of people like Dave and I who we've taken lessons since we were in first grade or 5 years old, and we played in some bands in high school. So maybe that college experience for us wasn't year 1. We were somewhere in the middle of it. Like I know for me, when I got out of college, it was about 2 years after that I made a full transition and I started playing really heavy. So luckily, I was somewhere in the middle of that like 10-year internship, basically. And I was able to come out of it a little quicker.
Yeah.
But everyone kind of has to go through that stage.
Yeah, they say that. I mean, I've heard that more than once, They say New York City is a 10-year city if you were an artistic type, whether it be acting or music or art or whatever it is, whatever your creative vice is. They say like New York and LA are 10-year cities. If you are some sort of prodigy, maybe you can cut that down a bit. But if you're just a good player, it takes you about 10 years to really get your return in that city. And that's hard for a lot of people because I know a ton of people, they start in their undergrad or they start somewhere else. A lot of people in the Midwest here, and then they flock to New York City. And the issue is it doesn't matter how good you are starting at year 1 there. And, you might hit a few lucky breaks, but, New York is not necessarily known as like this big cover scene, not like the Midwest where you can get a ton of what we call blue collar gigs to pay the bills. They're a little bit more of a serious art scene. Same with LA. So, to really break into those scenes, it can take you, upwards of about 10 years. And I've also heard that if you don't break it in about 10 years, it might be time to come home.
Yeah, interesting.
So yeah, it's those are tricky cities.
Yeah, it's a cultivating process.
Yeah.
You have to expect to be, to be a seed in a dirt level pot, right? You can't just think that you're gonna go and migrate and flourish and be all colorful and fruit bearing and producing, right off the get go. I mean, I totally get it.
Takes time.
Thinking about, go ahead.
I was going to say, and for most players, average players that like really master their instrument well, that 10 years is still saying that I have my eggs in a bunch of baskets. That doesn't mean that you only play these gigs, because the likelihood is that unless you're the top 10 of the 7.4 billion people on the planet in your thing, it might be very hard for you to do only one thing.
Yeah, you got to cast a
and
big
make
net.
a good life.
Right.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you're casting a big net. You're thinking of lessons. You're thinking of musicals. You're thinking of blue collar gigs. You're thinking of doing a couple of original projects when people will pay the sidemen. You have multiple genres. There's a lot of things that you're playing with.
Well, sure. I mean, let's examine the both of you, for instance, right? So you're practicing musicians. You have gigs that are both cover-oriented with multi-genres, and you have original gigs, again, multi-genred, when it calls for it. You're instructors, right?
Yes.
You both teach. And I truly do believe that, that's a big cast. That's a big wide net, because again, it comes back to context. You never know whose parent of what student that you're teaching happens to be related to so-and-so or happens to know so-and-so who all of a sudden will come up with, hey, do you know? And you're like, well, as a matter of fact, I do. My own instructor or my child's instructor happens to be this, happens to be that. And that's that circles back to when you retransplant to a different city or geography or location, you have to understand that keep widening your circle to get that, you just don't know,
And it's so important because not only is it widening your circle, but those oddball contacts that call you out of the blue have been often where the biggest opportunities have come for me.
Yeah.
They're not things I planned on. And, at least my personal philosophy is like, I have a rough idea of where I'm going, but I don't hold hard to that line, because in general, I do 110% on everything I do, and I try and make sure that I'm always approaching everything like that because I never know where the opportunities will come. So I'm just making sure that I'm open for whoever comes at me and offers me something so that way I can take off in a new direction if that's where I want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave the biggest footprint you can. Never underestimate the size or opportunity, there, I'm making some notes, and I thought it would be interesting to maybe do like a what to tell or what to guide a beginner, what to tell or what to guide someone who's stuck in the middle. Maybe not even stuck, but just in the middle, and then maybe speak to some things to the actives out there. I'm knee deep, I'm waist deep in it. There might be something they're not thinking of or haven't thought of, Let's start with the beginners. So if you're lucky enough to be listening to this cast, and you're between the age of 5 and 10, or even 10 and 15, and you haven't begun yet, and let's also add in, let's say you're a parent.
Well, I want to say that I firmly believe there is no wrong time to start.
Right.
I don't even want to categorize it by age. I would say beginner is beginner, intermediate is intermediate, and advanced is advanced. I've seen some...
That's a good point.
How old was Wes Montgomery when he started?
Well, that's the thing.
Wasn't he in his 20s or something?
You look at someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Wes Montgomery, two people who literally define their genres, and both of them started in their late 20s.
Yeah.
So
did
they have a hard uphill battle?
Wow.
Yes, they did. Yeah. They chose a harder path, but if you want it, it's always there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well then let's retract the age. No, I agree. I'm always working on this.
Not to sidetrack.
Yeah,
but
no.
Yeah.
Let's keep it broad.
Yeah.
Let's keep it broad. That's a smart move. But again, whether you're the individual who's ready to do something, and it is time for you to begin, and you're wondering what that means, or if you're a parent and you've noticed that, your child or children have something that you would consider the it factor when it comes to music and or, performing. Here we are. So what's a beginning maneuver? Haven't done a thing yet. Go. What do you think?
My biggest thing is, and this can be really hard when you're a beginner, but start the process of thinking about what it is that you actually want out of this. Because that's one of the most important questions that you can answer for yourself, and being honest with yourself about what do you want out of it. Because, not to go back to the people who told me not to make a career out of it, but there's this flip 22 of, if you can get an enjoyment out of this where you love your life and you love what you're doing, but you only really need to be doing it for a couple hours a day or a couple hours a week, and you're happy if you can do a show a week with your buddies. And if those things will make you happy, then you know that you can pursue another career or do something, and know that this can be a true hobby. This is a thing that I can treat as a hobby and enjoy, and I will love my living for it. But on the other hand, if everyone's been telling me that you just got to go 100% in, and I find out that by the time I'm putting in 100-hour weeks for 5 years straight, and it's making me hate the thing I wanted to enjoy, a lot of people get in that point too, and then they become disillusioned with the thing they thought would bring them so much happiness. So it's one of those moments where I say, if you really think that you want to do this full time, make sure that there's no plan B kind of option. This isn't, you can do whatever you want with your life, but it's not really the kind of thing that you typically just get to dip your toe into. You kind of go in or out.
You need that
you
weight
want that
on your
conviction.
Shoulders. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And it's not to say you can't give it a try and do something else later. It's just, I'm trying to help people. I don't want you to feel like you wasted 15 years of your life pursuing something. And if you can get the same amount of happiness and joy out of it, but then you can also have a comfortable life because you did finish your engineering job or something like that, then, you and 90% of the other people who are interested in creative acts, but know how hard it is to monetize it, you might find a very enjoyable life if you can find that balance. But then for the extra 10%, and who knows what the numbers are, but for that extra group who's just like, nope, I'm going to get home every day and do nothing but play this. I'm going to take days off work just because, I had an idea last night and I couldn't get it out of my head. I had to write it down. And in fact, I'm truant now at my job because I'm spending so much of my time doing this thing instead. It's like, well, that might be your sign. Like, you can't help yourself. You just have to create, or you have to play. And you're realizing that it's literally getting in the way of you doing anything else.
Yeah.
And at that point might be the time to find out, okay, how do I jump in the deep end? What's my exit strategy? If I really wanted to do this, how do I start making that happen in the next 5 years, or whatever your timeline is?
Yeah. No, I fully agree. That's one of the first, assuming I have a student that's old enough to, think critically and a little bit more esoterically, I will ask them, what do you want out of this? What do you hope to achieve? If I have...
why?
And
right?
why, yeah.
What and why?
If I have a middle school student, I'm like, do you want to play in a band? Do you want to play in the jazz band? Are you here by choice? Is mom and dad making you? I won't necessarily be like, are you forced here to take lessons?
Do you need the safety word is.
Right. But
just as valid. Like, if you want
to
make a living out of this versus you just want to play at a campfire, I'm like, those are both valid options. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be able to play at a campfire. That's a completely valid reason to want to do this.
Yeah.
So, right off the bat, I try and get those feelers out from them and see where they're at. And like I said, that's not age dependent. It's more just, if they can be honest with themselves and think critically. The next thing that I typically do with beginning student, so let's just say we have just run-of-the-mill 12-year-old guitar student, right? So they've probably arrived to this on their own. Maybe they got, very much enamored with the stylings of Stevie Ray or Hendrix or anything like that, as a lot of guitar players typically find themselves doing. And they wanted to learn how to do some of that. That's a great starting point. The next thing, immediately, almost hand in hand with why are you doing this, is how do we expand this? And the first thing I try and do is turn them on to different music, because that is so important. If you really love one genre, that's great, and you're going to grow and you're going to expand into that. But it's so important to be able to listen to other stuff too and expand equally and parallel to the first thing that you've loved. So if you love the blues, the next thing I'm going to show you is some 70s funk. After that, we're going to move into some R&B. After that, we might move into some fusion. And if I can expand your listening palette to take all of these encompassing genres that really go hand in hand with one another, all of a sudden this person, even if they can't play it all yet, they're listening to the right stuff, because that's half of it. It shocks me how many students come to instructors and they don't listen to music. They really don't. It's
Wow.
crazy. It's very much crazy.
Wow.
I don't really know why people arrive to wanting to play instruments. And this is actually, if we have any listeners that maybe can shed some light on this, I've always been curious how so many people arrive on their own volition trying to learn an instrument and they don't even listen to music. That's interesting to me. That's like learning a foreign language with no intention of ever using it. I'm not 100% sure.
That's a unique insight.
Yeah,
Never would even have
so
guessed
yeah,
something like that.
I try and get them. I'll even tell them, it would be like, this is a listening week. If I have a student that's maybe a little bit on the edge of not listening enough, I'll be like, okay, any time that you would have spent practicing this week, here's your album. You listen to this album from start to finish this week. And, even if it takes you 3 different times of sitting down for 10 minutes at a time, you're going to listen to the whole thing.
Well, it's unique. It's technique and range, right? I mean, by introducing these other genres, they're not so stuck in these certain patterns, right, on their instrument, right? So it's about expanding their patterns and expanding that's how that's done, or that's where that sound can come from, from my instrument, and where I'm at,
And especially if they can get it from a source who is telling them, like, not only is this just not the stuff you put on the background, but these things will further along in the path you've already chosen, and we're curating ideas for you to listen to. So we're giving them assignments to listen to with a focus and interest in what they're doing, which is great, because not to quote Derek Trucks, but, what you listen to is just like the food you eat. If you listen to junk food, junk will come out. If you listen to good stuff that has to do with what you want to produce, then good things will eventually come out. So I view it much in the same as, like, I was like, this is your musical diet. If you want to play these things, you need to be listening to them, immersing yourself at least a bit.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
Because
garbage in, garbage out. That's part of my real world when
actually-
it comes to reporting.
Yeah. that ties in actually very well into the advanced stages of music, learning, gigging, all that stuff too, is learning how to critically listen to stuff, because there's plenty of times that you're going to get hired for good money to go play the quote unquote junk food music. However, just like junk food, there's a lot of ingredients that goes into that music.
Sure.
And you need to understand how to dissect them. So, at the very beginning, am I telling my students to listen to pop tunes? Not a ton, no. But if I get an advanced student, I'm like, yeah, no, you need to learn like that exact bass line from that Dua Lipa tune. Or you really need to understand the minutia of what Lizzo was going for in that one song or something like that.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes, how do you recreate this? How do you, as a musician, you've mastered your instrument. I don't need to talk to you about scales anymore. I don't need to talk to you about like, oh, what's the dominant of this and this? You get it. Now it's like, okay, how do we get to this more philosophical, like, what sort of sound are they going for? How do we really dial in this random tune? And that was a interesting thing that I came to when I started really gigging, is assuming that I knew how things worked, and then learning in the real world that I didn't know how things worked.
Yeah.
The first time that I got
think
hired,
all of us experience
yeah,
it, right?
The
In
first
one time
time
or another,
yeah,
or over and over again.
Yeah.
In my case, no.
Yeah. Well, first time I got hired onto a blues gig, I was like, yeah, 12-bar blues, easy. I got this. I didn't have that. Just because you can technically play it doesn't mean anybody wants to hear it. You got to be able to understand, like, if you're playing some old, down home Delta blues, and you're playing, in that style, you need to understand how that's supposed to sound.
Yeah, soulfully executed.
Yeah. And that's the same for anything, pop tunes, country tunes even. Country's not my favorite genre in the world, but I've spent time trying to understand how a country bass player, that's spent their entire lives in Nashville and they are now recording with serious country artists, would think. And that's, a skill in and of itself. So.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're doing very well at, covering the what and the why, from a personal examination, from a beginner's viewpoint. Let's do the how. So I'm a beginner. How do I begin I mean, we're not speaking definitively. We're speaking toward, more so against what's worked for you and what's worked for colleagues of yours, right? The how. Should I be more self-taught, obviously with all of the different things that we have today, you've got your YouTube videos, you've got all these different sites, indirect and direct, that you can, how to, right? As instructors, what do you believe, ultimately thinking that the model should be at some point, you truly do, you need to get lessons, you need to get a professional perspective on next steps, right? What's the ideal as instructors? How should someone arrive to be at the greatest point of gaining or continuing momentum when they show up to you?
The way that I know that someone is really making progress and taking those next steps often honestly comes from knowing that they're actually inquisitive and exploring the ideas that I'm giving them, because there's no such thing as someone who isn't self-taught. Because the truth is, there's only so many things you can do in a hour-long lesson, even if it was twice a week. There's only so many things you can do, and if they went home and only militantly practiced those things, they might come out of it being able to play some scales and such. But if they're not taking those and trying to apply them immediately to the music they're interested in, and also taking those ideas and seeing how they could twist them and make them their own and continue to explore those concepts, to me, when I know someone's on the right path and there's a chance that they're about to go to the next tier, is often when they start coming into lessons more often and they did learn the thing I asked them to, but more importantly, they come in and say, yeah, but I tried it out in this song and it just didn't work. Or actually, this sounded really good and I don't know why it sounds good. And I can tell that not only are they doing the things I asked them to do, But now they are taking it and just really poking and prodding at all of the avenues around them. And they're trying to really understand, why does this work, or how can I make it work? And now they're the ones coming into questions with me. And I can tell that they are truly learning beyond just lessons. And now I am more of a guidepost, telling them, check out this direction for a while and check out this direction for a while. Hey, have you tried out this whole genre? This has a lot of the ideas you're talking about you might want to implement back into what you're doing. And it becomes less of a week to week, put your finger here, do this, and much more broad strokes.
So it sounds like you're not more stage concerned with when they arrive to you, but it's interest level. It's the inquisitiveness of of why they're here.
Exactly.
To get a lesson. Yeah.
And there is a spark, and there's a commonality in people who seem to have that spark, and the way that they start approaching lessons and the way they approach their instrument. And I can always tell that they're aiming for that next tier, and they're really pushing for it.
Yeah, Dave, how about you? How do you feel when you got somebody new? They're on their way. By the way, is there any kind of a screening or vetting process, or you might look and see that somebody is coming your way and you don't know who it is, and it's a first time encounter? Or...
Yeah, I try and do meet and greet at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't turn anybody away though. If somebody wants to learn, I will do my best to educate them the best of my abilities.
Yeah.
But
what's your ideal?
So at the beginning, kind of going back to what you're talking about before, being self-taught in the traditional sense, I think is an important thing to be able to be learned from sometime in lessons. So at the very beginning, no amount of YouTube videos or anything is going to substitute for an instructor in person teaching you how to play your instrument.
I would agree.
Because a YouTube video can't stop and tell you, hey, actually your wrist is a little bit wrong there. Or actually your finger has not quite the right curve to hit that key. It won't. It can't.
Yeah, someone on a video can't think of everything.
And I'm sure you've run into this, Dave, where I've told people, I'm like, watch YouTube, do what they do, but don't listen to what they say. There's a lot of misinformation with vocab specifically that I'm like, it's going to muddle your thoughts a lot. So if they taught you a riff, and you can follow their fingers in the tab, do that. But do your best to ignore the vocab for now, unless I vet and say that that's a good person to listen to.
So that real-time effect is priceless.
Once you get that going,
of
course, YouTube's a beautiful resource. Let's all use it all the time. It's great.
I still use it.
Of course, absolutely. But you need to be able to decipher the good from the bad on YouTube, and that's where your instructor will help you through the forest, so to speak, and make it through the light on the other side.
Yeah, very cool insight.
But I mean, as far as formal education goes, I don't think that ever stopped. It shouldn't ever stop. Even now, at this point in my life, where I've achieved a degree in higher education, I still have plans to reach out and take one-off lessons with some of the world's greatest bass players. Which they do that through Zoom and through Skype and stuff.
Oh, man.
And, you can schedule a 1-hour lesson with them, some of the absolute best players in the world.
Yeah.
And the thing about those lessons is I'm not learning technique anymore. I get that. They're not going to be like, well, actually, you should lead with your second finger when you're playing a major scale. No. I get that, obviously. What we're going to discuss now is like, well, have you ever thought about applying this melodic minor idea over this set of changes? Or have you really actually explored this like Lydian dominant sound? Or like, it's going to be very highbrow philosophical music speak. And the idea of those lessons is it helps you think in a different way musically than you would have before. So I don't think lessons ever really end. Now, do you need to go every single week? No. At the beginning, yes. But after you've progressed to a certain point, you now have the tools necessary to be self-taught, to work on your own terms. And like Devin said, if you can catch that spark early of being like, how do I apply this over this, even though it was once applied over this, that's going to stick with you lifelong. And it just gets more advanced. What used to be like, oh, how do I apply these simple ideas over this simple song become, how do I apply this like crazy lick that I learned from whoever over this other crazy song that I've learned through whoever, right?
Sure.
So it becomes that ability to really chase and try and progress yourself at all different stages of your development.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you guys correctly, the message ultimately is, if you're thinking about it, dive deeper, inquire about a lesson, have a little consult, a one-on-one with a potential instructor. You don't have to, if you're not feeling it with that one, call another one.
100%,
Shop.
yeah.
It's like anything else in life. Shop around, shop it around. See who you feel like you might be able to find that common ground with. But to those of you out there who are beginners, and that means I haven't picked it up.
You bought the guitar yesterday.
Yeah, I picked it up at my buddy's house, and I can't stop thinking about it. Yeah. To I've been playing one chord for 3 months, and I obviously need to at least start playing two, or find out where to go. The message is begin. The answer is, if you're a beginner, well then truly begin.
Do it. Yeah. And the only other thing I'll say, which is a pretty hard rule, is find a buddy. The buddy system is fantastic.
Wow.
Doing this in a vacuum is one thing, but the sooner you can be jamming with someone, it doesn't need to be a group. You don't have to have a band.
Yeah.
Find a buddy who wants to jam with you, hopefully near your level, a real peer, and that the two of you can really build off, because starting to learn the interactions that you're going to have non-verbally with other people, there's no secret to it. It's just doing the process over and over again and building up on all those cues. And a lot of them are quite universal. So if you find anyone, you two learning how to communicate ideas with each other over time will transfer when you start finding other people in some fashion.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, my best friend in high school is a drummer. We rarely had a bass player or anyone to join us, and it was just guitar and drums 4 hours a day after high school every day.
Yeah.
And, I learned so much in time and feel, and also how not to just try and be like an 80s shredder all the time, because it wasn't fun for him. So we were finding out, how do we make this fun for both of us?
Yeah.
And, that ultimate claim comes back to the listener too,
Yeah.
What are they going to find interesting? If I'm boring the musician, the audience is really not going to find it interesting. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think we have arrived at our first cast that has a genuine part 2 and maybe even a part 3.
Very cool.
Everyone out there, we appreciate you listening. Again, we're talking about sustaining your success, where to begin, where to go to, where to hopefully end up. Thanks for listening, everybody. Part 2 is on the way. This has been Laserlight Presents All About the Gig.